Breaking new details about North Korea's missile launch. Kim Jong-un's regime firing what's believed to be an intermediate-range ballistic missile over Japanese airspace for the second time in a month.
The threat of nuclear weapon by Russia is a serious threat to international peace and security.
I absolutely cannot accept it.
If you thought Ukraine and Taiwan were in a bad situation, then Japan's case will give you a heart attack. Despite having one of the strongest and largest armies during World War II, modern-day Japan has no army at all. This is crazy because it is always in conflict with its aggressive neighbors. China is always pushing for control of disputed Japanese territories. North Korea keeps launching missiles over Japanese airspace. And even Russia is eyeing contested Japanese lands. Despite these threats, Japan is committed to a policy of no militarism. This commitment comes from its post-World War II constitution, which rejects war as a way to solve conflicts. Instead, the US has been protecting Japan based on the security assurances they have. However, it seems that President Trump is unhappy and might be pulling out of those deals soon.
But we have an interesting deal with Japan that we have to protect them, but they don't have to protect us. Do you know that? That's the way the deal reads. We have to protect Japan. And by the way, they make a fortune with us economically. There's another case. But we have to protect Japan, but under no circumstances do they have to protect us. I actually ask, who makes these deals?
So, with the US threatening to abandon Japan, and with its own neighbors growing stronger and more aggressive, how will Japan survive without an army of its own? Alright, before we jump into things, be sure to hit that like button below. It helps out a lot against the bots who try to dislike the video to kill its reach. Recently, the channel was mass reported for my coverage about the Russian war, which led to a big hit to the views, so your likes really help out a lot. Thank you. To understand this case better, we need to first go back in time to the height of Japanese imperialism. You see, in the early 20th century, Japan was a rising imperial power, eager to expand its influence. It had a strong military, modernized through years of reform, and was determined to become a major world force. The nation's path to military power began in the late 1800s. After centuries of isolation, the country rapidly modernized during the Meiji Restoration, a political event that restored imperial rule to Japan in 1868 under Emperor Meiji. The nation built a powerful navy and army, modeled after the West, and soon started to expand its territory. By the early 20th century, Japan had already defeated China in 1895 and Russia in 1905 in major wars, proving its strength. In the 1930s, Japan became even more aggressive. It invaded Manchuria in 1931 and later launched a full-scale war against China in 1937. Seeking to control resources and land, Japan pushed further into Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you might recall that Japan then joined World War II on the side of Germany and Italy, attacking Pearl Harbor in 1941. This bold move dragged the United States into the war, setting the stage for Japan's downfall. This rapid expansion that Japan had going on came at a terrible cost. The war drained its economy and resources, while its enemies, especially the US, launched devastating attacks. Cities were bombed, industries collapsed, and millions of lives were lost. The most tragic event came in 1945, when the US dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombings killed over 200,000 people, many instantly and others from radiation over time. By August of 1945, Japan had no choice but to surrender. The war was over, but the destruction was overwhelming. More than 3 million Japanese people had died, and much of the country lay in ruins. The once powerful empire was broken. The loss, suffering, and atomic bombings left a deep mark on the people's minds. Many began to see war not as a path to glory, but as a source of endless pain and suffering. In their eyes, change was needed, and the US thought the same. So, under the US occupation that came with post-war reforms, Japan was completely reshaped. General Douglas MacArthur and his team led efforts to transform and rebuild the nation. Their main goal was to prevent Japan from becoming a military threat again. At the center of Japan's transformation was a new constitution, adopted in 1947, which included a groundbreaking clause, Article 9. This clause stated that Japan would forever give up war as a way to solve disputes, and that it would never maintain land, sea, or air forces or any other war potential. By disarming Japan, the idea was that the world wouldn't be thrown into a costly war again. However, the creation of Article 9 wasn't without controversy. MacArthur and his team, working with Japanese officials, wanted to make sure Japan would never return to militarism. The clause was clear. Japan wouldn't have the means to wage war. But here's the thing. The wording of Article 9 left some room for, let's say, interpretation? While it banned war and the maintenance of armed forces, it didn't specifically say anything about self-defense. This uncertainty has led to many debates over the years. Can Japan have military forces just to defend itself? Or does Article 9 mean Japan couldn't have any military at all? These questions, asked decades ago, have shaped Japan's identity and its approach to security. We'll dive more into this in just a second. In the early years after the war, Japan's pacifist constitution was seen as a part of its new democratic identity. The horrors of World War II, including the atomic bombings and the widespread destruction, left a deep mark on the Japanese people. Many embraced pacifism as a way to make sure that such devastation never happened again. Article 9 became a symbol of Japan's commitment to peace and its rejection of war. But the world was changing quickly, and Japan's role in global politics would soon test its pacifist principles. Then, in 1950, everything changed when the Korean War started.
We are united in detesting communist slavery. We know that the cost of freedom is high, but we are determined to preserve our freedom no matter what the cost.
As the US sent troops to Korea, Japan was left exposed. With the new People's Republic of China spreading communism in Asia, the US shifted its strategy. Japan's role in the Cold War suddenly became crucial. The US began urging Japan to build up its defenses, even slightly, to help stabilize the region. The irony of this is funny, isn't it? After all, it was that very US that had helped push for demilitarization only a few short years later. This was a major departure from the original goal of Article 9, which aimed to keep Japan from having any military power. So what did Japan do? In August of 1950, the National Police Reserve was formed. Officially, it was meant to maintain order within Japan, but its real purpose was to lay the foundation for a stronger defense system. The National Police Reserve started as a lightly armed force of 75,000 personnel, with an additional 8,000 for maritime safety. Modeled after the US Army, it was led by a commander overseeing 4 regional units. While not officially military, it was clear this force was a reaction to the changing world. The Korean War highlighted Japan's strategic importance, and the US saw the National Police Reserve as a way for Japan to contribute to security without violating its constitution. Over time, the force grew. Fast forward to October of 1952, and it was renamed the National Safety Force and expanded to 110,000 members. This marked a significant step in Japan's gradual move towards rearmament, even as the government insisted these forces had no war potential. The creation of the National Police Reserve and its evolution into the National Safety Force reflected Japan's delicate balancing act. On one hand, Japan was committed to its pacifist constitution. On the other, the Cold War's realities and the need for self-defense required some military capability. This tension between ideals and practical needs shaped Japan's security strategy for decades. The National Safety Force, though not a full military, set the stage for what would later become the Japan Self-Defense Forces, or JSDF. The creation of the Japan Self-Defense Forces in 1954 was a big moment for Japan after World War II. Officially, the JSDF was set up only for self-defense, not for attacking other countries. It's made up of 3 main parts: the Ground Self-Defense Force, or GSDF, which handles land operations, the Maritime Self-Defense Force, or MSDF, which protects Japan's waters, and the Air Self-Defense Force, or ASDF, which guards Japan's skies. Even though the JSDF isn't a traditional military, it has grown into a strong and modern force. Japan has spent a lot of money on high-tech equipment like fighter jets, destroyers, and missile defense systems. But the JSDF has limits. It can't send troops overseas or start attacks, and any attempt to change these rules causes a lot of debate, both in Japan and around the world. The JSDF's job is strictly to defend Japan, which fits in with the country's commitment to peace. The JSDF's growth has been shaped by Japan's constitution. While the constitution bans having land, sea, or air forces for war, it doesn't say Japan can't have forces for self-defense. This loophole has allowed Japan to build up the JSDF over time while still claiming to follow its pacifist principles. The JSDF is designed to be purely defensive, with no ability to attack other countries. This has helped Japan argue that the JSDF doesn't break the spirit of Article 9, even if it pushes the limits. Today, the JSDF is one of the most advanced defense forces in the world. Presently, it's said to have about 250,000 troops. But even with these high numbers, the JSDF has trouble recruiting enough people. In 2023, it aimed to bring 19,598 new members, but only got 9,959, which is just 51% of its goal. This shows how hard it is for Japan to attract new recruits, especially with its aging population and cultural resistance to anything that feels like militarism. To address these challenges, Japan has increased its defense budget significantly. In 2024, defense expenditure was just 1.4% of GDP, up from 1.3% in 2023 and 1.1% in 2022. The government has pledged to raise defense spending to 2% of GDP, aligning with NATO standards. Alongside budget increases, Japan is making major technological advancements. The JSDF, a converted destroyer, recently facilitated the landing of a US F-35 stealth fighter, marking a milestone in Japan's naval aviation capabilities. Additionally, Japan is acquiring Shield AI's VBAT drones to enhance naval intelligence and surveillance operations. All signs point to them beefing up their security. Japan's strategic positioning remains critical in the face of regional security threats, particularly from China and North Korea. The JSDF operates under strict limitations, raising the question, can Japan defend itself in an increasingly dangerous world? Well, the answer's not really clear-cut. Japan's pacifist constitution remains a cornerstone of its identity, but the realities of the modern world have forced Japan to adapt. Amid these developments, Japan's strategic positioning remains critical in the face of regional security threats, particularly from China and North Korea. The rapid military expansion and aggressive territorial claims by China pose one of the most pressing challenges for Japan. The dispute over the Senkaku Islands, known as the Diaoyu Islands in China, has become a focal point of this tension. Though uninhabited, these islands are strategically significant, and China has frequently sent Coast Guard vessels and military aircraft into Japanese-controlled waters and airspace, leading to tense encounters with the JSDF. Essentially, it is bullying, and Japan wants to be able to stand up for itself. Beyond territorial disputes, China's ambitions in the Indo-Pacific region are also cause for concern. The Chinese military has modernized at a shocking pace, deploying advanced missiles, stealth aircraft, and naval warships. This makes them a dangerous enemy to have. On top of that, Beijing's growing influence in the South China Sea and its increasingly aggressive stance towards Taiwan further worsen Japan's security worries. If China were to launch military action against Taiwan, Japan could be drawn into the conflict due to its geographical proximity and alliance with the United States. Given China's military advancements, Japan would be in big trouble. Outside of flexing its military might, China also employs non-military means to apply pressure on Japan. Economic coercion, such as trade restrictions and boycotts, has been used to punish Japan for diplomatic decisions Beijing opposes. Additionally, cyber attacks originating from China have targeted Japanese government agencies and private companies, posing a significant security risk. As if that's not enough, disinformation campaigns aimed at shaping public opinion in Japan further demonstrate China's multi-pronged approach to influencing regional dynamics. In the Northwest, Japan has another big problem: Russia. The two countries still haven't settled their fight over the Kuril Islands, a group of islands that Russia took control of at the end of World War II. Japan wants them back, but Russia refuses to even talk about it. Instead, Russia has been building up its military in the area. Recently, Russia and China have been doing joint military drills, which shows that they are working more closely together. This makes things even harder for Japan when it comes to staying safe. The way the war is going in Ukraine has also made things worse. Japan joined other Western countries in punishing Russia with sanctions. In response, Russia has been flexing its military muscles near Japan, like setting up advanced missile systems and holding naval exercises in the Pacific. That's open intimidation right there. On top of that, Russia controls a lot of the energy supplies in the region, and Japan depends heavily on imported oil and gas. This makes Japan's security situation even more complicated. With no army, Japan poses a smaller threat to Russia, and hence Putin feels like he can just walk all over Japan. If you think China and Russia are bad news for Japan, then North Korea's threat level would be said to be apocalyptic. North Korea poses an immediate and unpredictable danger to Japan. The regime frequently tests missiles, some of which have flown over Japanese territory, keeping the country on constant alert. With North Korea advancing its nuclear program and developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, Japan must prepare for the possibility of a direct attack or sudden escalation in regional tensions. In recent years, North Korea has launched several missiles over Japan. On August 29, 2017, a ballistic missile flew over Japan and into the Pacific Ocean, sparking international outrage. Another alarming incident occurred on October 4, 2022, when a missile flew over Japan and then landed in the Sea of Japan, triggering emergency warnings for citizens to take shelter. Just a month later, on November 3, 2022, North Korea fired another ballistic missile off its east coast, with one believed to be a long-range missile that flew over Japan. These tests show North Korea's determination to improve its missile technology, despite global pressures and sanctions. For Japan, all this means staying vigilant and ready to respond to a threat that could emerge at any moment. The truth of the matter is that Japan is in trouble. North Korea's cyber warfare capabilities also pose a serious threat. The country has been accused of hacking Japanese institutions, including government agencies and financial entities, to steal data and disrupt operations. The growing relationship between North Korea and Russia raises additional concerns, as it could provide Pyongyang with military or economic support that strengthen its aggressive posturing. All this means danger signs are flashing left and right for Japan. So, with all this said, the big question is, how has Japan been responding to these threats? Well, for starters, the country has strengthened its security alliance with the United States, engaging in joint military exercises and deepening cooperation on defense technology. This shift reflects a recognition that Japan must take a more proactive role in its own defense. Japan and the United States are working closely together to improve their defense partnership, especially when it comes to advanced military technology. One big part of this is Japan's involvement in the F-35 program. Japan's self-defense forces are buying state-of-the-art F-35 fighter jets, along with missile defense systems and surveillance drones, to upgrade their military and defend against growing threats in the region. In October of 2023, the US, Australia, and Japan announced plans to join forces and develop uncrewed aircraft. Just a couple of months later, in December of 2023, the US and Japan agreed to explore artificial intelligence for collaborative combat aircraft. This marked the first project under their new research and development partnership. A prime example of this partnership is that F-35 program, where the US supplies Japan with these cutting-edge jets. By working together, the two countries are tackling shared security challenges head-on, maintaining regional stability and strengthening their alliance through innovation and teamwork. This partnership is a powerful example of what can be achieved through collaboration and a shared commitment to security. As a result of the relentless attacks it has faced, cybersecurity has also become a national priority. Japan has plans to establish a dedicated cybersecurity agency to counter threats from China, North Korea, and other hostile actors. Efforts to secure critical infrastructure and strengthen intelligence sharing with allies are key components of the strategy. People in Japan are split on the issue. Many strongly believe in keeping Japan's pacifist identity, while others think the country needs to beef up its defenses. With security threats growing, more people are calling for Japan to have counter-strike capabilities, like being able to hit enemy missile sites before an attack happens. As regional tensions continue to rise, Japan's ability to navigate its security challenges will depend on a combination of diplomacy, military preparedness, and international alliances. Strengthening ties with like-minded nations such as South Korea, Australia, and India could provide additional strategic advantages to countering China's influence. Japan's participation in the Quad alliance alongside the US, India, and Australia is a step in this direction. Perhaps more than all of these individual points, the US is Japan's greatest asset of deterrence. Since the end of World War II, Japan has depended on the US for its security. This relationship was made official with the US-Japan Mutual Defense Pact, first signed in 1951 and later revised in 1960. So what does this pact mean? Under this agreement, the US promises to defend Japan if it is ever attacked. In return, Japan allows the US to station troops and military bases on its soil. This pact has provided Japan with protection under the US nuclear umbrella, meaning that any attack on Japan would be met with the full force of the American military power. That is what has kept China, Russia, and North Korea behaving, to some degree. As a result of this alliance with the US, Japan has been able to focus on economic and technological development instead of maintaining a large military. Because Japan's post-war constitution bans it from having an offensive military, the country has completely relied on this agreement for security. However, in recent times, Japan's reliance on the US has come into question. As global tensions rise and its neighbors keep getting more and more hostile, many wonder if the US will continue to honor its commitment to Japan, or if Japan needs to take more responsibility for its own defenses now. Outside of these fresh doubts, the US-Japan alliance has been playing a huge role in keeping peace in East Asia. With threats growing from China, Russia, and North Korea, the presence of US troops in Japan, especially Okinawa, has helped prevent attacks. Okinawa hosts 32 US military bases, encompassing about 70% of all US military bases in Japan. The two countries also work together on military drills to make sure they're ready to handle any threats in the region. Despite all it's done, cracks are now starting to form, threatening to tear the alliance apart. The US has pushed Japan to do more for its own defense, especially as China builds up its military and North Korea develops more nuclear weapons. President Donald Trump has said America shouldn't have to shoulder all the responsibility for protecting Japan and has urged Japan to pay more and take on a bigger role, even hinting that the US might pull out of the deal. If the US president were to actually do that, Japan could be left in a tough spot without the protection it's relied on for so long. This uncertainty has led to serious discussions in Japan about what it should do if the US can no longer be counted on for security. These discussions have Japan rethinking its defense plans. One of those discussions is the big question on whether Japan should build its own nuclear weapons. For years, Japan has been against the spread of nuclear weapons. After the atomic bombings on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan has always pushed for a world without nukes, but now some leaders and experts say Japan might need its own nuclear weapons to stay safe if the US stops protecting it. After all, nuclear weapons are the ultimate deterrent of war. To its credit, Japan has the technology and resources to build nuclear weapons fast if it wants to. It already has a strong nuclear energy program and advanced missile tech. Supporters say having nukes would scare off enemies and keep Japan safe, just like how nuclear weapons have stopped big wars between other countries. However, the idea of Japan having nuclear weapons is very controversial. Most Japanese people are against it, believing it would go against Japan's identity as a peaceful nation. Plus, if Japan gets nukes, it could start a dangerous arms race in East Asia. Countries like China, South Korea, and North Korea might respond by building more nuclear weapons, making the region even more unstable. It's a tough situation to be in if you're Japan. You might think Japan's the only US ally worried about its security, but it's not alone. Other countries such as South Korea, Germany, and Poland are also debating whether they need to develop their own military or nuclear weapons. Why? Well, this is a response to uncertainty regarding the US foreign policy under Trump. In South Korea, some politicians have suggested that the country should develop its own nukes to counter the threat from North Korea, especially if US support weakens. In Europe, US withdrawal from major security agreements such as the INF Treaty and the Iran nuclear deal have led to growing concerns about American reliability. As a result, countries that once depended on the US for protection are now rethinking their defensive strategies. Japan now faces one of the biggest decisions in its modern history. Should it continue to rely on the US for protection, hoping that the alliance remains strong? Or should it take steps to strengthen its military, even if it means moving away from its pacifist ideals? This is not just a question of security, it is a question of national identity. Since the end of World War II, Japan has built its image as a peaceful, non-militaristic nation. This has been a source of pride for many Japanese people. But as the world becomes more unstable, Japan must decide whether its commitment to peace can survive in an increasingly dangerous environment. The US-Japan alliance has kept Japan safe for decades, but if that alliance weakens, Japan will need a new strategy. Whether that means increasing its military strength, developing nuclear weapons, or forming new security partnerships, one thing is clear. The decisions Japan makes in the coming years will shape its future and the future of East Asia for generations to come. And at the heart of Japan's struggle with pacifism is a deep cultural and political divide that has shaped the country since World War II. On one side are people who see pacifism and the rejection of war as a sacred principle, born from the horrors of war and written into Japan's post-war constitution. On the other side are those who believe Japan must change to survive in a dangerous world. This debate is happening in Japan's politics, schools, and streets as the country tries to figure out if it can keep its pacifist ideas while facing growing threats from China, North Korea, and Russia. The debate isn't just about safety. It's about who Japan is, what it values, and what kind of country it wants to be in the 21st century. Education and peace museums have played a huge role in shaping how Japanese people think about pacifism. For years, schools have taught students about the terrible costs of war, stressing the importance of peace and rejecting militarism. Almost every Japanese student has visited one of the country's 76 peace museums, which are spread across 32 regions. Museums like the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum are powerful reminders of the human suffering caused by war, especially the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Over 74 million people have visited the Hiroshima Museum alone since its opening, and most leave with a strong dislike for war. However, these museums often focus on the suffering of the Japanese people and skip over Japan's own actions during World War II. This one-sided story has helped create a deep sense of pacifism in Japan, but it's also been criticized for not showing a balanced view of history. Still, education and peace museums have been incredibly important in making war seem not just like a political failure, but a moral one. The political debate over Article 9 is at the center of the struggle. For decades, Article 9 has been a key part of Japan's identity, symbolizing its commitment to peace and rejection of war. But as threats from other countries grow, some politicians argue that the clause isn't enough to keep Japan safe. Former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, a conservative leader, pushed for changes to the constitution to let Japan play a bigger role in global security. His idea, called proactive pacifism, aimed to interpret Article 9 so Japan could do more to protect itself and others. Critics, though, say this would go against the spirit of the Constitution and push Japan towards militarism. The drama over Article 9 isn't just about laws or politics. It's emotional, touching on Japan's identity and the legacy of World War II. Additionally, changing the Constitution is hard. It requires a 2/3 vote in Japan's parliament and approval from the public and a referendum. So far, no government has been able to do this, showing how divided Japanese society is on this issue. Older Japanese citizens who lived through the war or grew up right after it tend to feel strongly about pacifism. They see it as a moral duty and a way to honor those who died in the war. For them, Article 9 isn't just a law, it's a promise that Japan will never go to war again. Younger Japanese, though, have a different view. They've grown up in peace and prosperity and don't feel the same emotional connection to pacifism. Surveys show that while most Japanese support the idea of self-defense, younger people are more open to changing Article 9 and strengthening Japan's military. This generational split is also seen in politics, with younger leaders often taking a more practical approach to security. Still, even younger Japanese are hesitant to fully embrace militarism. The trauma of World War II and the atomic bombings still affects how Japanese people think about war and peace. As Japan deals with these big questions, one thing is clear: the world is watching. Japan's decision will have big consequences, not just for itself, but for the whole region. Japan's pacifist constitution has been an inspiration, showing that a country can reject war and choose peace. In fact, you could say that Japan's pacifist experiment is one of the most unique in modern history. For over 70 years, it hasn't fought any wars or fired any shots in anger. But as threats grow and alliances change, Japan faces a tough choice. Can it survive without an army and stay a symbol of peace in a world that seems to have forgotten the lessons of the past? Or will it have to become a quote-unquote normal country, with all the risks and responsibilities that come with it? The answer will shape not just Japan's future, but the future of the whole world. YouTube just dropped a mind-boggling announcement. It is paying creators $64 million per day. Why? Well, because YouTube doesn't have enough creators. That is why you see videos on your homepage that have less than 1,000 views, like this one. Now, of course, that doesn't mean everyone should start a channel, but if you have ever wondered about starting a YouTube channel, or a faceless YouTube channel like this one, well, now's the perfect time. YouTube is paying creators millions every day, and it's pushing newer, smaller channels now more than ever. But I'm sure many of you have questions on how to get started and how to grow a channel. We get questions in our email all the time from some of you guys. So that's why we've decided to put all of our YouTube advice into one training bootcamp for the low price of completely free. So, if you're someone interested in starting your own YouTube channel, you can sign up for this bootcamp by clicking on the link in the description or on the screen. Sign up now because, unfortunately, unlike YouTube videos, the bootcamp is like a Zoom call, so it's limited to just 100 people. Okay, let's get back to the video.